Okay, we're about ready to get started. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the second session of our series, Partnering with HUD on Affordable Housing, Best Practices for State Governments. This series is a collaborative effort between the Council of State Governments and the Department of Housing and Urban Development. My name is Joseph Shivitz. I'm the Housing Policy Analyst for CSG East. Last week, we were joined by the Delaware State Housing Authority to discuss homeownership, while today our focus is preservation, ways to preserve the existing housing stock, to maintain an adequate supply of homes, and ultimately to improve affordability. We're joined by subject experts at HUD and by the leadership at Pennsylvania's Department of Community and Economic Development. After presentations, we'll have a Q&A during which you can raise your hand to be unmuted or simply type in your question. Pretty soon, we'll be joined by HUD Region 1 Administrator Juana Matias. She is running over from another panel that she's on, so she'll be here in just a minute, but we're going to get started with our presentations. First up, we have Sarah Molseed from HUD, the Deputy Director in the Office of Recapitalization. Sarah, if you'd like to go ahead.
Great, thank you. So I'm Sarah Molseed. I sit in the Office of Recapitalization at HUD, and that is an office that is in our multifamily housing office. So we are cited within the part of the organization that also has FHA lending and is on the Section 8 PBRA contracts, so project-based rental assistance. I always like to kind of give folks some sense of where we're situated because HUD definitely has a very large organizational chart. But our office oversees primarily two different programs that I wanted to talk about today that are very focused on preservation. The first of those is the RAD program. It's also known as the Rental Assistance Demonstration. It's been around for about 10 years. And what we do through that program is we are able to take public housing projects and also Section 202 PRAC contracts and Section 8 mod rehab contracts and convert those into a longer term regular Section 8 platform, either through project-based rental assistance, which is administered by the Office of Housing, or through project-based vouchers, which are administered by the local PHA. And the RAD program was created in order to address the severe capital backlog that we've seen at most of our public housing properties over the last 20 years. I think the last estimate we saw was there's $115 billion in capital backlog at these properties, and unfortunately the appropriations have not kept up with the physical needs of these public housing programs. And so the RAD program can try to help on preservation in a couple of different ways. First of all, it allows these projects to convert to a longer term subsidy stream. Many of these programs currently only have year-to-year funding or year-to-year contracts, which makes it very difficult for them to secure private lending or private equity because the subsidy is not guaranteed over a longer period of time. And in the RAD program, we're allowed to offer these projects 20-year contracts. So 20-year Section 8 contracts to guarantee that the subsidy is there. The other thing is that in the public housing and the 202 programs, those projects are not allowed to take on any private debt. They're not allowed to record mortgages against the real estate assets, and so therefore they don't have access to the debt markets. But by converting through the RAD program, they're actually able to access both private debt, including FHA debt through HUD, and low-income housing tax credits to provide additional debt and equity. And in the last 10 years in the RAD program, we've converted more than 200,000 units to this platform, and we've been able to leverage over $19 billion in capital improvements. So it has been a real success in terms of getting additional funds into the program. We actually leverage almost $20 in non-federal funds for every public housing dollar appropriated. And the way the mechanics of the RAD program work is that it does, in the public housing side, it takes the subsidy that HUD is already providing to the Public Housing Authority and then just converts that into a Section 8 rent. And so the intent is to stabilize the operations, to allow public housing authorities to have a little bit more predictability on the year-over-year revenue rather than the year-over-year appropriations, and so therefore should stabilize and help preserve properties. The other aspect of the RAD program that we're very proud of is that it has a very robust resident rights section. We actually, in our office, have an entire team for resident engagement and protections to ensure that the residents are not displaced involuntarily. all residents in the RAD program have a right to return, and they're not subject to any additional rescreening. So unlike some of the other revitalization programs in the past, particularly Hope 6, which could have a reputation for displacing the communities, the RAD program actively works to make sure that everybody who wants to come back to the projects can come back, or to the developments can come back to the developments. So that's kind of just a little bit about the RAD program. I wanted to give just a very basic overview of that tool for public housing that may be distressed, since that is often a great resource for families of low income looking for affordable housing, and it is absolutely a resource that's in need of preservation. The other program that my office administers is called the Green Resilient Retrofit Program. I'm actually going to share a slide on this one. Just to see, and this is a program, the only program that HUD is administering that was funded in the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022. We received $837 million in order to allocate out to project-based Section 8 and 202 and 811 properties. So again, project-based properties that are within the Office of Housing portfolio. And we're allowed to provide this funding through grants or loans in order for these buildings to pursue either climate resiliency or energy efficiency retrofits. So far, we've awarded $842 million out there. The map shows where these funds have been allocated. We've actually have 182 properties that have received funds, and we have been able to impact almost over 22,000 homes through this program. There's a few different flavors of the Green Resilient Retrofit Program, some that are just helping other tax credit or other debt recapitalizations that are already underway, to another flavor of the program is called Leading Edge, which allows properties to achieve very high green certifications. And then the majority of our money is in a part of this program called Comprehensive, which really allows owners to pursue extraordinarily deep energy retrofits and resiliency improvements in order to make sure that these houses are preserved for the long term for the residents that are there. And so that's kind of a very quick overview of the two programs within the Office of Recapitalization. I think I used up my allotted few minutes of time, but I'm happy to answer any questions at the end if folks have them.
Thank you for that, Sarah. We will get to a Q&A at the end, but I did want to ask you one question quickly, which is, for these programs, do states, I mean, are they reaching out to you to get started with these programs, or can you talk about that process a little bit of just how you're working specifically with states on these?
Sure. So with states, particularly, we work together when there is other state provided financing involved in the preservation action. So for instance, we've been working very closely with the state of Virginia, since they are providing bonds and other soft financing for some of our GRP programs, to make sure that those can work together. In the RAD context, we also work very closely with states to make sure that our financing policies are aligned, and also we work in terms of the FHA risk share program with some of our states in terms of providing the risk share through the state HFAs. So our primary contacts within the states are often the state HFAs.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much for that. Next, we're going to hear from Teresa Souza. She's a social science analyst in the Program Evaluation Division in the Office of PD&R at HUD. And I'm going to go ahead and pull up some slides. Teresa, whenever you're ready.
I think that's not the one that I have. Oh, there we go. Okay. That's me. Okay. So thank you for having me here. It's nice to learn from the experiences that the states have, and from the offices that we work with in PD&R, and also to share the work that my office does. So my name is Teresa Souza, and I'm a social science analyst in the Program Evaluation and Demonstration Division. I just wanted to share a little bit of information about HUD's Office of Policy Development and Research, or PD&R for short, so that you can have a sense of where I sit. So PD&R was created 50 years ago, combining policy and research functions that existed in different parts of the department at the time. And I left a link to a lot of the articles that are interesting and tell a little bit the story that PD&R has had developing research, evaluation, data policy to support HUD's mission. Currently, PD&R includes 5 major offices. So the Office of Economic Affairs provides economic information, analysis to HUD leadership. The office also administers the development and the collection of housing market data, and updates critical operational information for HUD's programs, such as the fair market rents and HUD's income limit. So that's an important office for the functions that HUD has. The Office of Policy Development, it engages in policy analysis and development. They disseminate policies and research findings through publications, and they do analysis and development of legislative proposals and regulatory guidance. A third office is the Office of Research, Evaluation, and Monitoring, which is where I work. And this is the office that conducts all the research, evaluation, demonstrations, and also does monitoring of a variety of HUD programs. Recently, the Office of Technical Assistance was incorporated in PD&R, and they oversee the development and competitive award of HUD's umbrella technical assistance program called Community Compass, which funds technical assistance and capacity building activities for HUD customers and grantees, including states, local governments, public housing agencies. So you might have come across Community Compass. And we also have a new office in PD&R that was mandated by the Evidence Act, which is the Office of the Chief Data Officer. And that office is responsible for functions related to data governance, open data, compliance with requirements related to data collection. So I'm going to discuss today a little bit of what we do under research, evaluation, and monitoring, which is, as I said, the office where I worked. But first, I just wanted to mention 2 major documents that guide the work that we do. In case you have an interest in taking a look, I put the links on the slides that can be shared later. But the first is HUD's 2021 Evaluation Policy Statement, which identified the core principles that PD&R and HUD aspire to ensure the quality of our evaluations. And the principles include rigor, relevance, transparency, independence, ethics, and technical innovation. A second tool that guides the research that we do in PD&R is the Learning Agenda, which is a living document that is updated regularly, and it's required by the Evidence Act, although PD&R had been doing a kind of a learning agenda before this requirement. And that's the document that identifies HUD's research, data, and evidence building needs. So I encourage you to take a look. It's a document that kind of shows where PD&R is going in terms of research and evaluation, and we are always looking for input from all stakeholders to help us guide what research PD&R is going to be working on. So take a look there, and there are opportunities for engagement with stakeholders, with policy, states, local governments, etc. And there you can also see the kinds of ongoing research publications and data sets that are produced by PD&R in the links that I included there. Now, moving to the next slide, since the focus today is the discussion of housing preservation, I just wanted to share some of the research that PD&R has done to evaluate the rental assistance demonstration, or RAD. that Sarah was talking about, and I have here some figures that I'm going to skip since Sarah already gave you the overview of RAD, but it's really an important program for housing preservation, and HUD has been evaluating the program since 2014. So on the first evaluation of the program that was conducted between 2014 and 2019 by a company named Econometrica and its subcontractor, Urban Institute, HUD was interested in assessing, among other things, whether RAD was leveraging private funds and other funds, addressing short-term capital needs, and ensuring the financial viability of converted properties. To assess the leverage funds, the study proposed different leverage ratios that capture the amount of additional funding that was raised for each dollar of funding that was committed. And Sarah already mentioned this, and I think that her numbers are slightly higher. This evaluation was done. It's early in the implementation of RAD, so the numbers don't align. But at the time in 2029, when the report was published, we identify a ratio of 9.66 dollars that were raised for every dollar of federally appropriated public housing funds. And then the study also assessed the extent to which RAD addressed short-term capital needs. And to do that, the study obtained financial and construction costs and compared before and after physical condition assessments in a sample of RAD projects and a comparable group of non-RAD projects. The study used a sample of 24 RAD projects and 48 non-RAD projects. And what the study found was that the construction cost for shallow rehabilitation of RAD properties was about $10,000 per unit. And the construction cost for moderate to deep rehabilitation of RAD properties was about $62,000 per unit. And what the study found is that comparing that to the physical assessment before conversion, the shallow rehabilitation covered 100% of the capital need pre-conversion, and while the moderate to deep rehabilitation covered 300%, so 3 times the need pre-conversion. So the study found that RAD was meeting its goal of addressing the lag financial capital investment that this properties needed and putting them in a better situation to remain affordable and viable. RUD contracted a follow-up evaluation of RAD that was focused on 5 different components, on some of the tenant protections that Sarah was talking about. We wanted to learn more about asset management and how these properties were being managed after the conversion and whether that was maintaining strategically the properties to continue to be financially viable. And these reports are going to be published in 1 or 2 months. So I encourage you to keep an eye for these reports that should be coming up soon. So moving on to slide 3. I just want to end with the links to the RAD evaluation, the RAD resource desk, which is where the Office of Recapitalization puts a lot of incredible information about the RAD program, but also share some of PD&R research on housing technology, which could be helpful in the preservation of affordable housing. And here you can see reports on retrofits and adaptations, on energy retrofits, on best practices for specific tribal housing, etc. So it's a great resource if you need best practices or resources to preserve affordable housing. So thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Teresa. Just one similar question as for Sarah, which is for states who maybe want to work with you on these or learn more about this, what's the best way that they can get involved in these programs or more involved if they're not already?
Yeah, so like I said, the learning agenda is a living document that is constantly being updated, and we want to fund research that can advance HUD's mission and advance the mission of creating affordable housing and supporting low-income families to have access to rental assistance. And so the feedback that we can receive from states is very important to shape where the evaluation is going. So we will welcome engagement there. We also have lots of opportunities in notice of funding availability where we open research applications for researchers, universities, states, grantees to apply and address specific research questions that HUD has. So that's another opportunity for states to maybe partner with universities and apply for to help us answer some of the research questions that we're trying to address in our learning agenda.
Sounds great. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Pennsylvania, I think we will be moving on here and hearing about some of the programs that Pennsylvania is working on around preservation. Let's see. Rick, Angela, Nick, do I see you here? Sorry, my camera is just okay, great, here you are. We have, I'll just briefly introduce and then pull up the slides. We have Rick Vallejo, the Deputy Secretary of Community Affairs and Development, Nick Hording, the Director of the Center for Residential Reinvestment Programs, and Angela Suston, the Director of the Center for Community and Housing Development, all within the Department of Community and Economic Development in Pennsylvania. So I'll go ahead and pull those up, and then Rick and your team, whenever you're ready.
Good morning, everybody. We still have 5 minutes, so I can still say good morning. It is an honor to join you today. This topic is really important to our mission. And when Governor Shapiro took office 2 years ago, he tasked DCED with developing an economic development strategy. And with that process, we went to communities all around Pennsylvania. And part of the economic development discussion was housing. And it was near the top of, if not the top of every discussion because of how it impacts workforce, how it impacts economic development. And out of that, 2 weeks ago, Governor Shapiro signed an executive order tasking DCD with writing a specific housing strategy, and preservation is part and parcel to what we'll be doing in writing the housing strategy. Under my deputy, I say it's the C part of DCD. We have the Governor Center for Local Government Services. You can go to the next slide. The Governor Center for Local Government Services, the Center for Community and Housing Development, the Center for Community Services, the Center for Community Enhancement, the Center for Residential Reinvestment, and the Community Planning Group. And we provide technical assistance and service to all 2,559 municipalities in Pennsylvania, the largest being the city of Philadelphia, and the smallest being Valley High Borough in Fulton County with 7 residents. So it's a pretty broad mission. And part of what we were looking at for presentation today was how we were being strategic, how we tie our programs together to leverage investments in fighting blight and adding to capacity and making our communities better places to live. We can go to the next slide. One of the things we were looking at is the strategic role that the state could play in building stronger communities and attracting businesses, and how they work hand in hand, and how we can leverage state funding, federal funding, and foundation funding, to make those investments go further. You can go to the next slide. Specifically for today, we looked at 3 specific programs: whole home repair, the community the general CDBG program, and home investment partnerships. And I'll turn it to my director, Nick Horting, to go to the next slide.
All right. Also, good morning. I'm going to mute Rick's. All right. You have to turn yours down. All right. Sorry, we were getting an echo on our end. Not sure if you all were hearing that, so we didn't want you to hear that. So yeah, whole home repairs program. You can quickly move to the next slide. That would be great. So I was asked to participate because of affordable housing preservation and what the Commonwealth is doing to try to help with that. And these are not HUD dollars, but it's a critical program that we use. And what we're finding is that HUD dollars are being leveraged with the program. And I'll talk a little more about that later, but just to kind of set the stage of kind of where I'm coming from in this whole scheme of housing preservation and affordable housing preservation. So just a little bit of background. In 2022, Governor Josh Shapiro, along with the PA legislator, allocated $125 million of Pennsylvania's ARPA dollars through the state and local fiscal recovery fund to establish the whole home repair program. Of course, at its infancy, it was kind of a pilot, and I think we could still describe it as a pilot program. But there is hope that in the future it will be funded with state dollars as well. And there's even been some discussions at a federal level where maybe it could even be funded at a federal level, depending, the need. Of course, I think everyone could argue that the need is definitely there, but then just the ability to get that done. So from Pennsylvania's perspective, we were able to get the $125 million from ARPA dollars, which was fantastic. They then moved to create a formula-based allocation for all the counties. So the unique thing about this program, or maybe not so unique, was unique to me, was that the counties were allocated the dollars and they were essentially set aside for them, right? So all they had to do was ask for them. And those allocations they were very wide ranges, right? So we have from a population basis, we have some very small counties that are very rural to those Allegheny and Philadelphia counties that are very large, from a small in size, but very large with population. So looked at the average income of the households. We looked at the age of the housing stock. So Pennsylvania has one of the oldest housing stocks in the country, which I would imagine most of you are familiar with, given the region that we're talking with. And then the number of housing units without complete kitchen or plumbing facilities was also taken into consideration. Once that formula was derived, it's kind of generated some dollar amounts for those counties, with the minimum award being $200,000. It actually would have been less, but they felt it was important to not give less than $200,000 so there can be a substantial impact into those smaller counties. And the largest being $21 million, which was Philadelphia County. And a bunch very much in between. I think Allegheny County was somewhere around $12 million. So that gives you an idea of just, the population in Philadelphia County. Next slide, please. All right, so what is whole home repair, right? So the idea is, as I understand it, is, really was generated off of the need, really the initial need with the weatherization program and these lengthy deferral lists that we have. So not waiting lists, we do have waiting lists as well, but we have lengthy deferral lists in Pennsylvania. And basically what that means is they go evaluate a home and they simply just can't weatherize it, right? Because it needs a new roof or it needs a foundation, so it gets deferred. And these deferral lists, what we were finding, were just, they last forever, right? These homes would go on these lists, they would never come off because there's no help for them, right? There's nothing that could provide substantial support, at least flexible wise. I mean, I think there is some programs that Angela will talk about, so I don't want to say there's no hope, but there was not a lot of options for those homeowners. So the idea was create a very flexible program that can address those habitability and safety concerns. The program also allows for improved energy and water efficiency and to make the units accessible for individuals with disabilities. So in the most simplest form, and what most of the dollars are being used for are homeowner grants. So someone who's eligible from an income perspective who owns their home can get a grant up to $50,000 to help fix their home, essentially. And the threshold there, and this was based off of the SLURF guidance through ARPA, was 80% of area median income. I'm sorry, it was not based off of that. That was an amount that was set by the Pennsylvania legislator. ARPA rules is actually a little different. So the program also offers small landlord loans, which is a forgivable loan up to $50,000 per unit. The definition of a small landlord is one that has no more than 5 properties or 15 rental units. And then the program also requires every county to make an investment into a workforce development program that connects trainees to jobs through committed employer partnerships related to improving the habitability and performance of homes. So that amount that they have to invest in is not defined. But it's a requirement that they place at least $1, right? Many of them is much more, but at least $1 into a workforce development program. Next slide, please. All right, so where we're at to date. So again, 125 million when this thing went live, and that was about counties started getting dollars around March to June of 2023, right? So we just had our year a mark back in March to June of this year and kind of evaluating where they're at. And they're actually doing really well. So we have 47 million in committed homeowner grants, which is what equals 2,000 over 2,300 recipients. And we're finding that the average grant is around $20,000. I think that a lot of that is because of Pennsylvania's prevailing wage. So anyone that's dealt with the ARPA money knows that Davis-Bacon has been waived, but Pennsylvania has very similar prevailing wage rules and laws, and that would go into effect for any project that's over 25,000. So I believe, that's probably playing a role in that 20,000, but that's what we're finding. We're finding the average grant amount is $20,000. So as far as leveraging, 75 of the projects have leveraged either or both one or both of the CDBG or home funds. So of these 68 that have reported total cost of 2.5 million, with an average increase in cost per unit rising from 20,000 to 37,000. So that's really where we're seeing the huge impact and the effect on these homes, right? What can be done with $20,000 versus $37,000 is substantial. Total CDBG and home dollars leveraged by these projects is more than $1.6 million. So you can move to the next slide. As I say, we would certainly love to see more homes being leveraged. But I'll skip to the challenges and I'll come back to the successes. So I think the challenge goes without saying. When they leverage these federal dollars through HUD, there are much more stringent and strict rules that are applied to the programs. Right. Things like Davis-Bacon, things like ensuring that the home is in compliance of all local codes. While all are incredibly important, the reality is there's a home that could need $100,000, in excess of $100,000 in work, really, to get to make sure that it has no code violations. And it's someone that's in drastic need and has a hole in their roof or their foundation's crumbling, and this goes to the success of the program, the flexible funding that can really step in and get them the proper repairs that they need in that moment to make their home habitable, without having to make the investment for having all of the codes being brought up to code. So I think that's it from my end. So I think I'm going to pass it to Angela. So if there's any questions, we'll certainly take them at the end.
Nick, sorry, would you be able to just really quickly mention what
Next slide,
Davis
please.
Bacon, when you say Davis Bacon is being imposed? Able to hear me?
Can we pass to the next slide? Thank you. Oh, no, I didn't. I'm sorry. I was looking at my notes. I didn't know. We can go to the next one. Rick did touch on kind of what's next for the housing plan in Pennsylvania, a comprehensive approach for affordable housing preservation and bringing all of these programs together. So the idea is hopefully creating a space for Pennsylvania residents where they can have access to all of the information at one site. So what that looks like is to be determined, but you know, an idea for an application, you know, one size fits all application, a one size fits all portal that provides all of these programs that individuals can be aware of, rather than having to go to different agencies locally as it kind of stands now. So that's what we're looking to accomplish in the future.
All right, good afternoon. As stated in the introduction, my name is Angela Sustin, and I'm the director of the Center for Community and Housing Development here at DCED. Our center administers the HUD Community Planning and Development Funds for the Commonwealth, which include the Community Development Block Grant, or CDBG, the Home Investment Partnerships Program, also known as HOME, and the Emergency Solutions Grant. The Housing Opportunities for AIDS is administered by the Pennsylvania Department of Health, and the National Housing Trust Fund is administered by the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency, just to give you an idea of how our programs are structured here in the Commonwealth. So for today's discussion, I'm going to highlight CDBG and HOME and how those funds are utilized for housing rehab in those programs. Starting with CDBG, we receive approximately $40 million annually and invest over $5 million, or 15 to 20% in housing rehab each year. Our method of distribution for CDBG is rather unique, as it is mandated under the Pennsylvania law known as Act 179. These funds are targeted to smaller communities and rural areas of the Commonwealth that are determined by looking at elements such as population and distress criteria. The method of distribution allows municipalities the latitude to determine the activities that best meet their community's needs. And with 15 to 20% of annual funding going towards housing rehab, this is an indication that there is a need for that particular activity. Next slide. So here you'll see a map of the Act 179 cities, boroughs, townships, and counties in the Commonwealth. Those are all in the darker blue colors. And then the lighter blue colors are those that receive CDBG funds directly from HUD. Next, I'll show you an example of a completed homeowner rehab project. This home is located in Buffington Village. And you can see in the before and after photos the dramatic renovation and significant improvement to this home. So the next program then is the HOME program. Next slide, please. DCED receives approximately $20 million annually in HOME funds. And through our method of distribution, we prioritize non-participating jurisdictions, or those communities that do not receive HOME funds directly from HUD. Each year, we fund about $5.5 million of HOME funds in housing rehab, or what's known as existing owner-occupied housing rehab. I think we're a little unique though too in this, and from what we hear from other states, is that we do invest more dollars in housing rehab through the HOME program than some other states. Some states don't even participate in that particular activity. Next slide, please. I just wanted to offer some photos of some renovations that were completed using the HOME funds. Next slide. This was a home in Grove City where you can see the stairs leading into the home were in poor condition and were replaced using HOME dollars. And here is a photo of a home in Farrell that received rehab, and see the significant improvement to the bathroom that provided this particular homeowner a more comfortable and safe space. So moving on then to some of the lessons learned in CDBG and home in administering housing rehab. First, it's critical to build relationships with subgrantees and provide them with the proper guidance and technical assistance to maintain compliance. So one thing we did was we created a housing standard rehabilitation guidebook that established the minimum standards and has been extremely helpful to our grantees, our subgrantees. Also, allowing flexibilities in maintaining affordable housing stock, such as acquisition, rehab, and resale, has also been successful. Next slide. So some challenges. These include sometimes a lack of timely response from HUD. We do have a very good working relationship from our field office, but at times with AAQs are submitted and things like that, you know, it can take a length of time to get a response or to receive guidance or maybe templates that HUD says are forthcoming. And sometimes it makes it difficult for us to maintain our progress in our programs. As Nick mentioned, state prevailing wage is a challenge, as well as costs of materials and small contractor pools are challenges that we're seeing here in the Commonwealth, and I know that we hear from other states that are experiencing those same types of issues. Next slide. I believe this is our last slide. We thank you for attending this session and listening to our discussion. Here is our contact information if you wish to reach out.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for those presentations. For everybody attending now, you know, we have some time for Q&A. If anybody would like to go ahead and raise your hand or enter your questions into the chat. I may just get us started here, and a question for either Pennsylvania or for HUD, just about, you know, given what we learned today, are there opportunities, you know, that you're looking forward to around preservation, where you see, you know, an ability to work on this further, or like what do you see up ahead?
I can speak to that. So recently there was a special notice of funding opportunity called PRICE that allows for the rehab and replacement of manufactured housing, as well as providing infrastructure for manufactured housing communities. And so along with Nick's office, we collaborated to submit an application where we requested $75 million. I think it's a unique opportunity for us, as there are, we have a large number of manufactured housing communities and manufactured homes in the Commonwealth, and older manufactured housing homes too, that we really feel that there'll be a need if we are a successful applicant, that we'll be able to provide rehab and replacement for manufactured homeowners throughout the Commonwealth. So we'll be excited to see the outcome of our application.
Thank you. There was a question for, I think, for Sarah. This is, what entities are eligible for the green retrofit program funding?
Sure. The entities that are eligible are owners of a housing project that is assisted either by a Section 8 project-based rental assistance contract, a Section 202 rental assistance contract, or Section 811 rental assistance contract. And so the owners of those properties that receive the HAP subsidies are the ones that can receive the funds.
Okay, thank you. I'm just keeping up with the chat and the Q&A and the, okay, here we have Representative Gear with a question. Let me just go ahead, and if you want to unmute yourself, please. Rep Gear, are you there? You just need to unmute your microphone and if you have a question. I see your hand is raised.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hello, can you hear me now? So sorry, I'm just not used to Teams that much, and I could not figure out quickly how to do all of that. Sorry. So in Maine, we recently passed a law that requires advance notification in the case of a sale of a manufactured home park in our state, and also to give the residents the opportunity to form an association and make an offer to purchase the park. That must be considered as an option to purchase by the owner. And I know that part of the challenge is the manufactured housing preservation when you need to address the unit itself. But I think across the country we're seeing more and more threat around the preservation of this naturally occurring affordable housing from the sales of the parks themselves. And so I was just wondering if any of the funding sources that have been touched on here today also might help in the case of mobile home park residents who may own their mobile homes, their manufactured homes, but obviously do not own the pads on which they sit, and are at great risk if the park is sold and rents are raised, which increasingly that is what is happening.
So I'll answer that. None of the funding that we spoke of would be applicable. However, that price NOFO that I mentioned did allow for that type of activity and funding for that type of activity that you mentioned, planning and preventing the sale and relocation of residents of manufactured housing communities. However, the application closed. I don't know if anyone from HUD can speak to, the possibility of, future rounds of that particular funding, but it was an eligible activity for the price NOFO.
Thank you.
Okay, we have another question from the Q&A. I think this is for Nick, but it says, any more information on the one-size-fits-all application that you mentioned?
So not yet. So as Rick noted, that Governor Shapiro just announced the idea of the housing plan for Pennsylvania, and I would imagine it's going to be a 5 to 10 year plan when it's all said and done. So stay tuned. I know that's an important. Pennsylvania has a lot of programs, both at the local, state, and federal level. And I think there's a desire, I know there's a desire to make that a little more user friendly for the low income families that are just overwhelmed sometimes, whether they're, working 3 jobs, or whether it's an elderly couple, or whoever it may be. There's just, it's hard. It's hard to find out where all of the resources that are available to you. And I think oftentimes a lot of the resources are probably missed. So there's a desire to come up with a resource, whether that's a single application that would connect an individual or a homeowner or whoever would be eligible to those programs, or if it's just a resource website. But there is a desire to do that. So yeah, I mean, I don't know that how we would make that announcement to a group like this, but it is something that Pennsylvania is pursuing.
Okay, thank you. I'm curious for Pennsylvania, if you all work with the RAD program that Sarah and Teresa were speaking about. And then Sarah, following that, I'd be curious if you've been seeing any trends around the country where states are putting this program into place, and maybe some lessons learned from that. But Pennsylvania, I'm not sure if you have any information there.
I believe based on what Sarah said, that would be administered by the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency.
Oh, I see.
So the RAD program generally is administered by the public housing authorities that previously owned and operated the public housing. We do have a requirement within the RAD program that the ownership needs to either stay with a public entity or a nonprofit entity, so that it's not, our program is not intended to be a large scale privatization of the previously public housing. So the public housing authorities, which differ state by state in terms of how they're incorporated or what their jurisdictions are, they're the primary people on the front lines of administering that RAD program. And I mean, in terms of trends, like what we've really seen, which I think is also was evident from some of Teresa's slides, is that, so the numbers that I cited and her numbers are very different, because since the pandemic, really, we've seen a much larger investment of private financing. We've seen folks really reaching to do deeper rehab than maybe they did in the early years of the program. And so that's how we get up to the, like, actually we're at a $19 public private leverage ratio. And I think, let me just look, but I have the stat for, we, if I can find it, the number of where we are in rehab right now, which is our most recent numbers, is that we're actually at 85,000 per unit being built or rehabbed. So it has really jumped in the last 5 years in terms of the amount of resources we've been able to see go into these projects and the ability to reach those developments that need actually a lot more work than some of the ones from the early days.
Okay, thank you. We just got a question from George Newsom. He's asking, is there any recruitment tool being used to fill RAD vacancies? I'm not sure if you can speak to that offhand.
And is that a question, just to clarify, is that like with respect to actual units that are vacant with the housing authorities? And if so, then I'm not, those tools are probably going to differ depending on each state. I know some states have done a lot of work in terms of trying to create a unified waiting list or other items where those vacancies can be advertised in a central place. But the waiting lists are, for the most part, administered on a project by project basis. So I'm not sure, but I hope so soon, because that's something that we've been trying to work towards in our office as well.
Thank you. We are approaching the hour. Are there any other questions for our speakers today while we have them? Once going twice. All right, well, it looks like that might conclude our session then. I want to give a big thank you to our speakers from HUD for joining, and from Pennsylvania for sharing your excellent insights. I want to thank all of our attendees for being here and engaging with us on this issue. Final reminder, I want to let you know we have 2 sessions in this series next week on Tuesday and Thursday. That's October 1st and 3rd. Those will be on development and then community development, and we'll be joined by Connecticut and then Maryland for those sessions. If you have any questions about what we went over today, or you want me to help put you in touch or distribute slides or anything like this, I'd be glad to help. So please reach out to me here at CSG East. Thank you, everyone. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.